Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak in support of Senator Plett's point of order. As has been mentioned, the employment of the Senate rule in question, Rule 7.2, requires two triggers. Number one, the Leader of the Government must consult with the representatives of the recognized parties, and number two, the, quote, representatives of the recognized parties, unquote, must have failed to come to an agreement to allocate time to conclude a debate. In the case of Senator Gould's motion of time allocation without agreement, neither of these criteria were fulfilled. Recognized parties is not a synonym for recognized groups. The Senate rules define recognized parties as we've already heard a couple of times before, composed of at least 9 senators who are members of the same political party which is registered under the Canada Elections Act or has been registered under the Act within the past 15 years, close quote. Clearly, of the 5 parliamentary groups currently in the Senate, only the Opposition Conservative Party of Canada caucus qualifies as a recognized party under that definition. As Senator Plett has stated, Senator Gould did not consult the Conservative opposition seeking agreement on a timeline for conclusion of the debate on the Bill C-11 message. Therefore, the first criterion was not met. Whether Senator Gould approached other parliamentary groups seeking consent would be immaterial. If he did not seek agreement with our Senate Conservative caucus leader, Senator Gould did not fulfill the clearly prescribed dictates of that Senate rule. Furthermore, since he did not consult with Senator Plett, the representative of the only recognized party in the Senate, Senator Gould cannot correctly state that there is, quote, no agreement on time allocation as per Rule 7.2 sub 2, and he cannot then in turn properly move a motion to allocate time. Although speakers in the past have declined to rule on the nature, the quality, or quantity of consultations between parties on time allocation, certainly there must be still some sort of an approach to seek agreement before the government leader can announce that the recognized parties have failed to agree, thereby engaging the rule. Otherwise, the rule is completely meaningless. The government could just impose time allocation whenever it wants, without the need for rules governing the process. In parliamentary terms, time allocation is about as serious as it gets. It drops the guillotine on debate, the most precious of our democratic freedoms in this place. It would be absurd if the rules regarding its usage were meaningless. Clearly, this is not what was intended. In 2014, in the shadow of the Senate expense scandal, then third-party Liberal leader Justin Trudeau chose to sever the Senate Liberal caucus's ties to the Liberal Party for his political expediency. During the 2015 election, Trudeau proposed his new independent Senate model. When the Liberals became government after that election, he put that plan into action, with Peter Harder as his transition team head. Since then, the Trudeau government has gone to great lengths to make it clear that Prime Minister Trudeau's new Senate appointments are not affiliated in any way with the Liberal Party. They are to be independent and non-partisan. They frequently claim that the Senate government leader is distanced from any partisan ties. The government representative office now only has a caucus of 3. Given this, I contend that the members of the government representative office, including the government representative himself, would also not qualify as, quote, representatives of the recognized parties, unquote, and therefore that he would be precluded from moving time allocation at all. It is important to closely consider the wording of the rule at section 7-2 sub 2. The Cambridge Dictionary defines agreement as, quote, a decision or arrangement, often formal and written, between 2 or more groups of people, 2 or more groups or people, close quote. Therefore, it is not possible to have an agreement of one representative alone, in this case, Senator Plett, nor is the term recognized party in Senate Rule 7-2 sub 2 indicative of an entity who is party to a contractual legal arrangement. In the political institution of the Senate, recognized party states affiliation with a political party as specifically identified in the Senate rules in the appendix. Time and again, the government's representative in the Senate has assured us of the GRO's lack of partisan attachments. The 3 members of the GRO caucus identify their political affiliation as non-affiliated, including on the Senate website, in the Senate chamber and committee broadcasts, as well as the Government Representative Office webpage. There, among the frequently asked questions, a heading asks, quote, why are the members of the GRO listed as non-affiliated rather than as members of a party? Close quote. The answer states, quote, the governing party's caucus in the House of Commons does not caucus with senators, a decision that was made to reduce partisanship and increase independence in the Senate, close quote. The government members of the Senate have intentionally not aligned themselves with the Liberal government's registered party. They can't turn around and piggyback on it now for the purpose of shutting down debate on the most controversial legislation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau established the new Senate appointment system this way intentionally, in an attempt to distance the Liberal Party and his Liberal government from the Senate expenses scandal. When he first appointed senators under this new system, the Prime Minister proclaimed it in his 2016 press release, quote, "The Senate appointments I have announced today will help advance the most important objective to transform the Senate into a less partisan and more independent institution by removing the element of partisanship and ensuring that the interests of Canadians are placed before political allegiances," close quote. Prime Minister Trudeau's then government House Leader Dominic LeBlanc said when announcing the changes to the Senate appointment system in December 2015, and please forgive the rough translation, quote, "As the minister noted, the appointment of the first non-partisan senators will revitalize the Senate and help change the tone in early 2016. More independent senators will join their ranks later in the next year. The government is pleased to facilitate this change by appointing its representative to the Senate from the ranks of the new non-partisan recruits," unquote. Minister LeBlanc continued in English, quote, "The government looks forward to leading this change by appointing one of the new independent senators to be appointed, as my colleague said, hopefully very early in the new year, to be the government representative in the Senate," close quote. When he appeared with Democratic Institutions Minister Miriam Monsef at Senate Rules Committee in February 2016, House Leader LeBlanc reiterated, quote, "We will be appointing a government representative from amongst those first 5 independent senators appointed under this new process. This senator will act as the government representative in your chamber. However, unlike perhaps a traditional government leader function, this individual will not be bound by party or political ties, as has been the case in the past," unquote. The Trudeau government's clear intent was that new appointees, including even the individual chosen to fill the role of the leader of the government in the Senate, would be divorced from their official Liberal Party affiliation. In fact, the very first of the assessment criteria listed on the Trudeau government's website for Senate appointees under, quote, "merit-based criteria established by the government," close quote, is entitled non-partisanship. It explains, quote, "Individuals must demonstrate to the advisory board that they have the ability to bring a perspective and contribution to the work of the Senate that is independent and non-partisan," close quote. Right from the start and consistently throughout, the Trudeau government has trumpeted non-partisanship as fundamental to its new Senate appointment process. The first self-styled government representative, Senator Peter Harder, spoke often of his distance from Liberal partisan ties. When he appeared before the Senate Modernization Committee in September 2016, Senator Harder testified, quote, "I believe that my task is not to be affiliated with a particular party or caucus or partisan identification," close quote. He also said, quote, "I would compliment Prime Minister Trudeau for the initiative that he has taken both in providing an arm's-length independent nomination process and to have removed his party caucus from the National Caucus by underscoring the institutional independence of our chamber versus the other chamber by appointing a representative, not a leader, who is independent in origin, not partisan," close quote. In his maiden speech in the Senate in April 2016, Senator Harder stated, quote, "Unlike any past leader of the government in the Senate, I sit as an independent. I do not belong to any political caucus. To fulfill my duties, I do not need to be a member of a political party and will not be a member of a national caucus or any political caucus," close quote. When he appeared before the Senate's Internal Economy Committee in April 2016 to request funding for the government representative's office, I asked Senator Harder if he intended to ask the new Trudeau-appointed senators to form a government caucus. His answer, quote, "Absolutely not. It's not my job to form a caucus or to direct independent senators in a particular organized fashion," close quote. Senator Harder further asserted the government's break with its partisanship in his April 2018 discussion paper. He wrote, quote, "The current government's approach to the Senate seeks, through the removal of a party-affiliated government caucus and the appointment of independent senators who have no personal stake in the election of a political party, to foster the conditions that will allow the Senate to leverage its unique qualities and demonstrate to Canadians its value as a complementary body of sober second thought," unquote. In 2019, the Government Representative Office released a, quote, "progress report on the new Trudeau Senate." It noted, quote, A crucial difference between the new and the old system is underscored by the absence of party discipline directed to independent senators on voting and other legislative matters. Previously, senators largely accepted direction on how to vote from party leadership. This is still the case with Conservative senators. In contrast, independent senators, whether they are unaffiliated, members of the Independent Senators Group, or the Independent Senate Liberals, are not directed how to vote and do not coordinate partisan strategy with members of Parliament, close quote. The Government Representative Office also stated, quote, of the three Senate groups, the ISG, the Independent Senate Liberals, and the Conservatives, only the 29 Conservative senators continue to sit as members of a national political caucus devoted to the election of their House of Commons colleagues, close quote. It is obvious that the Trudeau government regards the Conservative senators as the only recognized party in the chamber. This did not change once the Independent Senate Liberals morphed into the Progressive Senate Group, nor with the birth of the Canadian Senators Group, comprised of senators who had come from the Conservative and what used to be the Liberal caucus. As we know, they have since been joined by some Trudeau-appointed independent senators as well, but the CSG proudly proclaims freedom from party affiliation. Senator Gold, who would later go on to be the second government representative, said this of partisanship in 2017, quote, partisanship has taken on a particular importance because of the arrival of a new group of senators, of which I am one, who are not affiliated with any political party, who are not members of a political caucus, and who define ourselves as non-partisan, unquote. Just last fall, Senator Gold reflected on his distance from partisan ties in the role as the second Senate government representative. He said during our Senate Rules Committee in October 2022, quote, my ability to have unlimited speaking time has been an important tool that I've had to use, and my predecessor as well. It's rather important, even more important than it was maybe, because I don't have a caucus to control, quote. At a November 2022 Senate Rules Committee meeting, Senator Gold reiterated his freedom from political ties to the government. He said, quote, this government, which I have the privilege of representing, made a decision and a choice to disconnect the Senate from the control of the government at the time, and in that regard to seek to establish more independence and less partisanship. Yes, the consequence of that is that I don't have a caucus and I don't control votes. That is a decision of this government, close quote. The Trudeau government first proposed changing the Parliament of Canada Act to reflect this new non-partisan reality in the Senate via their Bill S4. In May 2021, when I questioned Trudeau government House Leader Dominic LeBlanc at the Committee of the Whole on why the government neglected to define the new roles in this legislation, he replied this, quote, the Senate is perfectly capable itself to define those roles in their own rules, and for the people who are ultimately appointed to those functions to decide in collaboration with different groups in the Senate and their colleagues in a particular group, for example, the kind of roles that they want to undertake and the work they want to do. We didn't think it would be particularly prescriptive to have job descriptions or lists of particular functions, unquote. Bill S4 and its successor, Bill S2, also aimed to change the Emergencies Act provision regarding the composition of the Parliamentary Review Committee. Under the existing Emergencies Act provisions at the time, the committee was to be comprised of at least one member from each recognized party in the House of Commons and, quote, at least one senator from each party in the Senate that is represented on the committee by a member of the House of Commons, unquote. Only the Senate Conservative Caucus qualified for a seat on the committee according to this party-affiliated definition. And as a result, there is no representation from the Government Representative Office on this committee currently sitting. The Senate leaders had to strike a deal to allow for the inclusion of representation from the ISG, PSG, and CSG groups when the Review Committee began its work in March 2022, as these groups were not affiliated with the party leader. The provision of the Emergencies Act governing Review Committee membership did not officially change to allow these nonpartisan Senate groups until it was passed in the Budget Implementation Act, Bill C-19, at the end of June 2022. Similarly, the only recognized party in the existing Senate rules is also the Conservative Opposition Caucus, representing the Conservative Party of Canada, the party of the official opposition in the House of Commons. Last fall, at Rules Committee in the Senate, senators carefully considered the rules triggering time allocation. Many of the leaders of the parliamentary groups were present at those meetings, including Government Representative Mark Gold. Some participants pushed hard to change the rules to also include parliamentary groups in the required agreement for time allocation. However, no consensus on the matter was reached, and therefore the existing Senate rule stands, requiring an agreement of recognized parties. We can also look to the rules governing time allocation in the House of Commons for further clarification. Standing Order 78.1 is the rule governing a motion for time allocation after reaching agreement with, quote, representatives of all parties, unquote. Notably, Beauchene's Parliamentary Rules and Forms notes at page 162 that, quote, the wording representatives of the parties in Standing Order 78 does not include independent members, close quote. Further, the House can also give us guidance on the requirement for consultation before the government invokes time allocation, and I refer to the same House of Commons procedure and practice quote that Senator Plett referred to regarding bringing the parties together to negotiate. There would be no bringing the parties together to negotiate if the government were not required to consult the other party members first. In closing, Speaker, I urge you to find Senator Gould's motion invoking time allocation on the Bill C-11 message out of order. He did not approach our Conservative Senate leader, the representative of the Senate's only recognized party, seeking agreement for ending debate, and Senator Gould therefore could not have failed to reach agreement for time allocation, as he indicated to the Senate in his motion. Furthermore, the Senate government leader cannot be the Schrodinger's cat of the Senate, tied to the governing Liberal Party for the purposes of representing a recognized party under Senate rules, while simultaneously claiming independence from all political affiliation. For 7.5 years, the Liberal government and both Senate government representatives have been adamant that there is no partisan tie. Therefore, I submit that it is out of order for Senator Gould to bring a motion of time allocation at all. Thank you.